Chapter 22 of Under the Lilacs by Louisa May Alcott. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Under the Lilacs by Louisa May Alcott. Chapter 22. A Boy's Bargain. It was some days before the children were tired of talking over Ben's birthday party, for it was a great event in their small world, but gradually newer pleasures came to occupy their minds, and they began to plan the nutting frolics which always followed the early frosts. While waiting for Jack to open the chestnut burrs, they varied the monotony of school life by a lively scrimmage long known as the woodpile fight. The girls liked to play in the half-empty shed, and the boys, merely for the fun of teasing, declared that they should not, so blocked up the doorway as fast as the girls cleared it. Seeing that the squabble was a merry one, and the exercise better for all than lounging in the sun or reading in school during recess, Teacher did not interfere, and the barrier rose and fell almost as regularly as the tide. It would be difficult to say which side worked the harder, for the boys went before school began to build up the barricade, and the girls stayed after lessons were over to pull down the last one made in afternoon recess. They had their playtime first, and, while the boys waited inside, they heard the shouts of the girls, the banging of the wood, and the final crash as the well-packed pile went down. Then, as the lassies came in, rosy, breathless, and triumphant, the lads rushed out to man the breach, and labor gallantly till all was as tight as hard blows could make it. So the battle raged, and bruised knuckles, splinters in fingers, torn clothes, and rubbed shoes were the only wounds received, while a great deal of fun was had out of the maltreated logs, and a lasting peace secured between two of the boys. When the party was safely over, Sam began to fall into his old way of tormenting Ben by calling names, as it cost no exertion to invent trying speeches and slyly utter them when most likely to annoy. Ben bore it as well as he could, but fortune favored him at last, as it usually does the patient, and he was able to make his own terms with his tormentor. When the girls demolished the woodpile, they performed a jubilee chorus on combs and tin kettles, played like tambourines. The boys celebrated their victories with shrill whistles and a drum accompaniment with fists on the shed walls. Billy brought his drum, and this was such an addition that Sam hunted up an old one of his little brother's, in order that he might join the drum corps. He had no sticks, however, and, casting about in his mind for a good substitute for the genuine thing, bethought him of bulrushes.
"Those will do first rate, and there are lots in the marsh, if I can only get 'em,"
he said to himself, and turned off from the road on his way home to get a supply. Now this marsh was a treacherous spot, and the tragic story was told of a cow who got in there and sank till nothing was visible but a pair of horns above the mud, which suffocated the unwary beast. For this reason it was called Cowslip Marsh, the wags said, though it was generally believed to be so named for the yellow flowers which grew there in great profusion in the spring. Sam had seen Ben hop nimbly from one tuft of grass to another when he went to gather cowslips for Betty, and the stout boy thought he could do the same. 2 or 3 heavy jumps landed him, not among the bulrushes, as he had hoped, but in a pool of muddy water, where he sank up to his middle with alarming rapidity. Much scared, he tried to wade out, but could only flounder to a tussock of grass, and cling there, while he endeavored to kick his legs free. He got them out, but struggled in vain to coil them up, or to hoist his heavy body upon the very small island in this sea of mud. Down they splashed again, and Sam gave a dismal groan as he thought of the leeches and water snakes which might be lying in wait below. Visions of the lost cow also flashed across his agitated mind, and he gave a despairing shout, very like a distracted moo. Few people passed along the lane, and the sun was setting, so the prospect of a night in the marsh nerved Sam to make a frantic plunge toward the bulrush island, which was nearer than the mainland, and looked firmer than any tussock round him. But he failed to reach this haven of rest, and was forced to stop at an old stump which stuck up, looking very like the moss-grown horns of the dear departed. Roosting here, Sam began to shout for aid in every key possible to the human voice. Such hoots and howls, whistles and roars, never woke the echoes of the lonely marsh before, or scared the portly frog who resided there in calm seclusion. He hardly expected any reply but the astonished caw of the crow, who sat upon a fence watching him with gloomy interest, and when a cheerful
"Hello there!"
sounded from the lane, he was so grateful that tears of joy rolled down his fat cheeks.
Come on, I'm in the mosh. Lend a hand and get me out,"
bawled Sam, anxiously waiting for his deliverer to appear, for he could only see a hat bobbing along behind the hazel bushes that fringed the lane. Steps crashed through the bushes, and then over the wall came an active figure, at the sight of which Sam was almost ready to dive out of sight. For, of all possible boys, who should it be but Ben, the last person in the world whom he would like to have see him in his present pitiful plight.
"Is it you, Sam? Well, you are in a nice fix."
And Ben's eyes began to twinkle with mischievous merriment, as well they might, for Sam certainly was a spectacle to convulse the soberest person. Perched unsteadily on the gnarled stump, with his muddy legs drawn up, his dismal face splashed with mud, and the whole lower half of his body as black as if he had been dipped in an inkstand, he presented such a comically doleful object that Ben danced about, laughing like a naughty will-o'-the-wisp who, having led a traveler astray, then fell to jeering at him.
"Stop that, or I'll knock your head off,"
roared Sam, in a rage.
"Come on and do it. I give you leave,"
answered Ben, sparring away derisively as the other tottered on his perch, and was forced to hold tight lest he should tumble off.
"Don't laugh, there's a good chap, but fish me out somehow, or I shall get my death sitting here, all wet and cold,"
whined Sam, changing his tune, and feeling bitterly that Ben had the upper hand now. Ben felt it also, and, though a very good-natured boy, could not resist the temptation to enjoy this advantage for a moment at least.
"I won't laugh if I can help it, only you do look so like a fat, speckled frog, I may not be able to hold in. I'll pull you out pretty soon, but first I'm going to talk to you, Sam,"
said Ben, sobering down as he took a seat on the little point of land nearest the stranded Samuel.
"Hurry up, then, I'm stiff as a board now, and it's no fun sitting here on this naughty old thing,"
growled Sam, with a discontented squirm.
"Dare say not, but it's good for you, as you say when you rap me over the head. Look here, I've got you in a tight place, and I don't mean to help you a bit till you promise to let me alone. Now then."
And Ben's face grew stern with his remembered wrongs as he grimly eyed his discomfited foe.
"I'll promise fast enough if you won't tell anyone about this,"
answered Sam, surveying himself and his surroundings with great disgust.
"I shall do as I like about that."
"Then I won't promise a thing. I'm not going to have the whole school laughing at me,"
protested Sam, who hated to be ridiculed even more than Ben did.
"Very well. Good night."
And Ben walked off with his hands in his pockets, as coolly as if the bog was Sam's favorite retreat.
"Hold on, don't be in such a hurry,"
shouted Sam, seeing little hope of rescue if he let this chance go.
"All right."
And back came Ben, ready for further negotiations.
"I'll promise not to plague you if you'll promise not to tell on me. Is that what you want?"
Now I come to think of it, there is one thing more. I like to make a good bargain when I begin,"
said Ben, with a shrewd air.
"You must promise to keep Mosaic quiet, too. He follows your lead, and if you tell him to stop it, he will. If I was big enough, I'd make you hold your tongues. I ain't, so we'll try this way."
"Yes, yes, I'll see to Mose. Now bring on a rail, there's a good fellow. I've got a horrid cramp in my legs,"
began Sam, thinking he had bought help dearly, yet admiring Ben's cleverness in making the most of his chance. Ben brought the rail, but, just as he was about to lay it from the mainland to the nearest tussock, he stopped, saying, with the naughty twinkle in his black eyes again,
"One more thing must be settled first, and then I'll get you ashore. Promise you won't plague the girls, either, especially Bab and Betty. You pull their hair, and they don't like it."
Don't neither. Wouldn't touch that Bab for $1. She scratches and bites like a mad cat.
was Sam's sulky reply.
"Glad of it. She can take care of herself. Betty can't, and if you touch one of her pigtails, I'll up and tell right out how I found you sniveling in the marsh like a great baby. So now."
And Ben emphasized his threat with a blow of the suspended rail which splashed the water over poor Sam, quenching his last spark of resistance.
Stop! I will.
"True as you live and breathe?"
demanded Ben, sternly binding him by the most solemn oath he knew.
True as I live and breathe.
Echoed Sam, dolefully relinquishing his favorite pastime of pulling Betty's braids and asking if she was at home.
"I'll come over there and crook fingers on the bargain,"
said Ben, settling the rail and running over it to the tuft, then bridging another pool and crossing again till he came to the stump.
I never thought of that way,
said Sam, watching him with much inward chagrin at his own failure.
"I should think you'd written 'Look before you leap' in your copybook enough to get the idea into your stupid head. Come, crook,"
commanded Ben, leaning forward with extended little finger. Sam obediently performed the ceremony, and then Ben sat astride one of the horns of the stump, while the muddy Crusoe went slowly across the rail from point to point till he landed safely on the shore, when he turned about and asked with an ungrateful jeer,
Now what's going to become of you, old Look before you leap?
"Mud turtles can only sit on a stump and bawl till they're taken off, but frogs have legs worth something, and are not afraid of a little water,"
answered Ben, hopping away in an opposite direction, since the pools between him and Sam were too wide for even his lively legs. Sam waddled off to the brook in the lane to rinse the mud from his nether man before facing his mother, and was just wringing himself out when Ben came up, breathless but good-natured, for he felt that he had made an excellent bargain for himself and friends.
"Better wash your face. It's as speckled as a tiger lily. Here's my handkerchief if yours is wet,"
he said, pulling out a dingy article which had evidently already done service as a towel.
Don't want it,
muttered Sam gruffly as he poured the water out of his muddy shoes.
"I was taught to say thank you when folks got me out of scrapes. But you never had much bringing up, though you do live in that house with the gambrel roof,"
retorted Ben, sarcastically quoting Sam's frequent boast. Then he walked off, much disgusted with the ingratitude of man. Sam forgot his manners, but he remembered his promise, and kept it so well that all the school wondered. No one could guess the secret of Ben's power over him, though it was evident that he had gained it in some sudden way, for at the least sign of Sam's former tricks, Ben would crook his little finger and wag it warningly, or call out,
"Bulrushes,"
and Sam subsided with reluctant submission, to the great amazement of his mates. When asked what it meant, Sam turned sulky, but Ben had much fun out of it, assuring the other boys that those were the signs and password of a secret society to which he and Sam belonged, and promised to tell them all about it if Sam would give him leave, which of course he would not. This mystery, and the vain endeavors to find it out, caused a lull in the war of the woodpile, and before any new game was invented, something happened which gave the children plenty to talk about for a time. A week after the secret alliance was formed, Ben ran in one evening with a letter for Miss Celia. He found her enjoying the cheery blaze of the pine cones the little girls had picked up for her, and Bab and Betty sat in the small chairs, rocking luxuriously as they took turns to throw on the pretty fuel. Miss Celia turned quickly to receive the expected letter, glanced at the writing, postmark, and stamp with an air of delighted surprise, then clasped it close in both hands, saying, as she hurried out of the room,
"He has come! He has come! Now you may tell them, Thorny."
Tell us what?
asked Bab, pricking up her ears at once.
"Oh, it's only that George has come, and I suppose we shall go and get married right away,"
answered Thorny, rubbing his hands as if he enjoyed the prospect.
Are you going to be married?
asked Betty, so soberly that the boys shouted, and Thorny with difficulty composed himself sufficiently to explain.
"No, child, not just yet, but sister is, and I must go and see that she is all done up, ship-shape, and bring you home some wedding cake. Ben will take care of you while I'm gone."
When shall you go?
asked Bab, beginning to long for her share of cake.
"Tomorrow, I guess. Celia has been packed and ready for a week. We agreed to meet George in New York and be married as soon as he got his best clothes unpacked. We are men of our word, and off we go. Won't it be fun?"
But when will you come back again?
questioned Betty, looking anxious.
"Don't know. Sister wants to come soon, but I'd rather have our honeymoon somewhere else. Niagara, Newfoundland, West Point, or the Rocky Mountains,"
said Thorny, mentioning a few of the places he most desired to see.
Do you like him?
asked Ben, very naturally wondering if the new master would approve of the young man-of-all-work.
"Don't I? George is regularly jolly, though now he's a minister perhaps he'll stiffen up and turn sober. Won't it be a shame if he does?"
And Thorny looked alarmed at the thought of losing his congenial friend.
Tell about him. Miss Celia said you might.
Put in Bab, whose experience of jolly ministers had been small.
"Oh, there isn't much about it. We met in Switzerland going up Mount St. Bernard in a storm, and—"
Where the good dogs live?
inquired Betty, hoping they would come into the story.
"Yes, we spent the night up there, and George gave us his room. The house was so full, and wouldn't let me go down a steep place where I wanted to, and Celia thought he'd save my life, and was very good to him. Then we kept meeting, and the first thing I knew she went and was engaged to him. I didn't care, only she would come home so he might go on studying hard and get through quick. That was a year ago, and last winter we were in New York at Uncle's, and then in the spring I was sick, and we came here, and that's all."
Shall you live here always when you come back?
asked Bab, as Thorny paused for breath.
"Celia wants to. I shall go to college, so I don't mind. George is going to help the old minister here and see how he likes it. I'm to study with him, and if he is as pleasant as he used to be, we shall have capital times. See if we don't."
I wonder if he'll want me round,
said Ben, feeling no desire to be a tramp again.
"I do, so you needn't fret about that, my hearty,"
answered Thorny, with a resounding slap on the shoulder, which reassured Ben more than any promises.
I'd like to see a live wedding. Then we could play it with our dolls. I got a nice piece of mosquito net for a bell. And Belinda's white dress is clean. Do you suppose Miss Celia will ask us to hers?
said Betty to Bab, as the boys began to discuss St. Bernard dogs with Spirit.
"I wish I could, dears,"
answered a voice behind them, and there was Miss Celia, looking so happy that the little girls wondered what the letter could have said to give her such bright eyes and smiling lips.
"I shall not be gone long, or be a bit changed when I come back, to live among you years I hope, for I am fond of the old place now, and Mina shall be home,"
she added, caressing the yellow heads as if they were dear to her.
Oh, goody!
cried Bab, while Betty whispered with both arms round Miss Celia.
I don't think we could bear to have anyone else come here to live.
"It is very pleasant to hear you say that, and I mean to make others feel so if I can. I have been trying a little this summer, but when I come back I shall go to work in earnest to be a good minister's wife, and you must help me."
We will,
promised both children, ready for anything except preaching in the high pulpit. Then Miss Celia turned to Ben, saying, in the respectful way that always made him feel at least 25,
We shall be off tomorrow, and I leave you in charge. Go on just as if we were here, and be sure nothing will be changed as far as you're concerned when we come back."
Ben's face beamed at that, but the only way he could express his relief was by making such a blaze in honor of the occasion that he nearly roasted the company. Next morning the brother and sister slipped quietly away, and the children hurried to school, eager to tell the great news that Miss Celia and Thorny had gone to be married, and were coming back to live here forever and ever. End of chapter 22.